Vince was simply the most inspiring and influential teacher I had as an undergraduate. Like so many students, I was enthralled by how Vince would take us from the Acropolis to Monticello and to the Pueblos of New Mexico, all in an hour, leaving us in absolute awe of the power, beauty, and import of these great works. When I returned to Yale Architecture School, I was his head TA for my years back at Yale. And I would often stay with him in the art history slide room and watch as he would put that day's lecture together with his incredible concentration as he composed the day's talk. Each lecture totally afresh, with hundreds of images to be projected side by side, all laid out on the light tables in the art history slide room. It was a rare opportunity to see a master at work and to begin to understand how his ability to thread that day's lecture together was a brilliant composition that visually flowed and connected, as well as being thematically and conceptually linked. This visual composition created an almost film-like sequence and allowed you to easily sit through hundreds upon hundreds of images in that darkened auditorium, like individual film stills, all pieced together and connected with his moving, booming, passionate voice. And this sequencing made it so easy for him to quite literally transport you from the Pueblos of New Mexico to the stone monumental structures of Mesoamerica, to the Grand Canyon, and then on to the canyons of New York City. These talks would literally at times take your breath away and leave you in awe of the power of architecture, actually in the power of the human spirit that could create those works. For Vince inspired us to think about the humanity within architecture and how the built environment influences who we are, both as an individual and as a society. His was a belief that architecture can elevate the spirit and can inspire us to help shape our world for the better. I, for one, owe Vince such a great debt. It was in my senior year, my very last seminar, where Vince described a World War I memorial to the missing in Thiepval, France, for the Battle of the Somme that Sir Edwin Lutyens had designed. He described it as a psychological journey to an awareness about loss, and that you had to walk through a gaping scream of an archway inscribed with the over 70,000 names of the missing from the Battle of the Somme. And as he so powerfully and eloquently described the experience of that memorial, I realized that a certain project of mine that I had designed for a fall class project, it was a memorial to the Vietnam War, had a similar psychological experience. It was a journey to an awareness about loss, although the two designs could not have been more different formally. While still in that class, I started madly writing. Vince was more than a little curious, but that written description of the design was the final part that I'd been struggling with before I could send the competition boards in. And Vince's description of the Lutyens Memorial was instrumental in making me understand that my design worked on a similar psychological level. He made you feel architecture was a living and breathing presence. For those of us fortunate to have pursued the arts and architecture, his was a voice that impressed upon us the deep responsibility we each would have in making our own works. And for so many others, he inspired a sense of wonder, respect, and responsibility for the built environment. He gave you a deeper understanding of how much our built works express our very humanity, and how much through these works we can and should influence and shape society. Vince urged us to think of the great social responsibility these works could have. In his own voice, in his introduction to American Architecture and Urbanism, he writes, "There is no difference between architecture and city planning. All must now, or rather again, be treated as one. This must be especially so because of the fact that every citizen must now share an active and critical responsibility for the future of the American city. As for that of the American community as a whole, his vote and his direct personal intervention and his own community can help determine the kind of world we will make. He made us want to help shape a better world, and the world will sorely miss him.